Hello friends, welcome to my show with no name. We're going to have a look at Brian Jones. Born in 1942, died in 1969. An English musician and composer, founder and original leader of the Rolling Stones. For the Stones, he played lead and rhythm guitar, slide guitar, sitar, dulcimer, keyboards, mellotron, marimba, harmonica, recorder, saxophone, and drums. Drums? With Keith Richards, Jones would play lead and rhythm parts together, and this became a trademark sound for the Stones. When Mick Jagger and Keith Richards became a songwriting team, to counter Lennon and McCartney, the Stones evolved beyond the blues that Brian had founded the band on. Loss of control of his band plus drug and alcohol made Brian more and more unreliable. The Stones replaced him. They had no choice. Mick Taylor filled his shoes on slide and lead guitar, and Brian sadly died a month later, drowned in his own swimming pool, leading to conspiracy theories that have not been proven or disproven to this day. Lewis Brian Hopkins Jones was born in Cheltenham, Gloucestershire, in the right leg of the Happy Jack Rabbit. A short train ride into London, maybe 60 minutes on a good day. He suffered from asthma from an early age. His middle-class parents were of Welsh descent. He was an excellent student, played first-chair clarinet in the school orchestra. He didn't like the school uniform he was made to wear, and this colored his attitude toward authority. Still, he passed his exams without studying. Jones listened to classical music played at his home, but preferred listening to blues, particularly slide guitarists Elmore James and Robert Johnson. He was given his first guitar at age 17. This coincided with his girlfriend Valerie getting pregnant. There may be no connection with these two events, but it happened around the same time in 1957. Brian advised her to abort, but she put the baby up for adoption. Jones quit school in disgrace and left home. He busked his way across Europe and returned to England penniless. In 1959, he went to see a band perform at a hotel. He met a young woman named Angie. They had a one-night stand, and yes, she got pregnant. Jones never knew. In 1961, Jones's girlfriend, Pat Andrews, gave birth to child number 3. He lived with her and the baby for a while, but music called and Jones answered, moving to London, where he met Alexis Corner and Jack Bruce, and became part of the London R&B jazz scene. He played slide guitar in a band called the Roosters in '63. Jones left and was replaced by an unknown Eric Clapton. And then Jones placed an ad in Jazz News to attract musicians for a new R&B group. Ian Stewart was the first to respond. Mick Jagger came next as a would-be singer, and Keith Richards, a childhood friend, followed. The Stones' first lineup consisted of Jones, Jagger, Richards, Stewart, and Dick Taylor on bass, and Tony Chapman on drums. Jones, Jagger, and Richards shared a flat in Chelsea. They would play along to blues records, Jimmy Reed, Muddy Waters, Willie Dixon, Howlin' Wolf, and Jones taught Jagger how to play harmonica. They persuaded jazz drummer Charlie Watts to join, and Bill Wyman joined as bassist. Jones was the guiding force in these early days of the band, and he considered himself the leader. Music was not Jones' only interest at this time, as Linda Lawrence, later married to Donovan Leitch, gave birth to Jones' fourth, a boy they named Julian. And then Dawn Malloy announced to Brian and the Stones management that she too was pregnant by Jones. She received a sum of £700 from Andrew Loog Oldham, who was not at all pleased with Brian. So, aside from trying to populate West London, Brian was also gifted with his other instrument, the guitar, but more so, he seemed at home on any instrument. On the Stones' early albums, aside from drums, vocals, boogie piano by Stewart, guitar and bass, Jones played any part that the Stones' whimsy called for. He can be heard particularly on Aftermath, Between the Buttons, and Their Satanic Majesty's Request. His sly guitar can be heard on I Want to Be Your Man, I'm a King Bee, Little Red Rooster, and No Expectations. He was responsible for the Bo Diddley style rhythm guitar on songs like The Last Time and I Need You Baby. He played sitar on Street Fighting Man and Paint It Black, marimba on Under My Thumb and Yesterday's Papers, recorder on Ruby Tuesday, sax on Citadel, dulcimer on Lady Jane, mellotron on She's a Rainbow, We Love You, and 2,000 Light Years from Home, and oboe on Dandelion. This is only some of his contributions. His harmonica is all over every album until Beggar's Banquet. His last Stones album was Let It Bleed in 1969. Andrew Loog Oldham observed the potential of a band writing their own songs and ordered Mick and Keith to do just that. This was the beginning of the end for Brian, who was left out of the songwriting and planning stages. Also, Brian had been the eye candy in an otherwise ugly band, but Jagger's charisma as a lead singer was unmistakable, and Oldham made Jagger the leader of the band. Jones' desperation grew as his drug and alcohol abuse destroyed his personality, and his mental health dwindled. Anita Pallenberg, Jones' girlfriend, somehow managed not to get pregnant, but she and Keith Richards had a fairly visible affair as Jones was hospitalized on a trip that the three made to Morocco. Jones and Richards were not exactly bosom buddies, so to speak, but Brian was crushed by the betrayal. Jones was arrested for drug possession after the police raided Keith Richards' home at Redlands. The London press were outraged, not by the drugs, but by the police trying to break the butterflies on the wheel. It was like Brian had two personalities, the introvert, deep thinker, and the preening peacock, gregarious, desperately seeking assurance from his peers. He could not cope and basically lost it, becoming a drug casualty and an early member of the 27 Club. Just before, he only sporadically showed up for rehearsals, and when he did, the band turned his amplifier off. He didn't even know. Talk about a fall from grace. He was fired in 1969 by Jagger, Richards, and Watts. The authorities called his death by misadventure. His liver and heart were severely enlarged due to drug and alcohol abuse. Was he murdered? No. Was he high or drunk when he went swimming? Again, no. He was not alone. He had people living with him at his mansion, including his Swedish girlfriend, Anna Wollin, who managed also not to get pregnant, but was a frequent flyer with Brian in the drug fantasy that he was in. And if you need more, I recommend the 2000 movie Stoned. A different version of his death is explored. It's salacious, but Brian Jones sold a lot of newspapers during his way too short life. Yeah, it is.